Welcome back. Presidential envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are set to meet tomorrow with Iran's foreign minister in Geneva. The second round of nuclear talks come as President Trump says any agreement must include zero uranium enrichment in Iran. As those talks occur, the United States continues to build up military assets throughout the region. Two aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford, are being positioned for potential strikes, as well as multiple fighter jets. That comes following the Munich Security Conference this weekend, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio skipped a high-level meeting with Ukrainian officials alongside representatives from Poland, Germany, and other countries. Rubio did meet with Zelensky in Munich, but didn't join the larger meeting due to scheduling conflicts. After Munich, Rubio traveled first to Slovakia and then Hungary, where moments ago he met with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Want to bring into our conversation President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde is back from Munich and joins us as well. So, Richard, I want to start with you just on the general idea that underpinning the news coming out of Munich was this seeming rethinking about some of the bedrock principles that have made us allies with, for example, the Europeans in the aftermath of a Rubio speech that was pretty magnified, even though he delivered it in his typical Rubio cadence. So different than Vance, but at the same time, you're still watching all of these foreign leaders sort of grapple with the ways that our typical world order has changed, or has it? I mean, what do you see coming out of this?
Look, Allie, the backdrop to the speech was important. You had all the toing and froing a few weeks ago at Davos over Greenland. Europeans have lost faith in the Article 5 commitment of the United States that we would come to their defense against Russia. You have 4 years of U.S. policy towards Ukraine, and over the last year, you had the United States pulling back from Ukraine and tilting heavily in Russia's direction. So, yes, as you say, and David will talk about this, there was, I think, an appreciation of aspects of the Rubio speech, and it was not J.D. Vance, but it still had questions about, real disagreements with Europe over climate change, over support for international institutions, immigration, and so forth. So, yes, I think the speech was basically welcome, but could it undo all the differences, again, over Ukraine, over tariffs, over really the totality of U.S. policy towards Europe over the last 12, 13 months? Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's like a tough love letter is the way that it was being talked about, David. And I wonder, from your conversations on the ground, does that description capture what key U.S. officials or certainly European officials on the ground felt in the aftermath of watching it?
Look, Rubio is a great politician and he delivered a very strong speech. But the key thing in the speech was that he constantly referred to Western civilization and Western values. And it was sort of this nationalist culture argument. He said the phrase Western civilization as often as he said the word democracy. And that image you just showed of him meeting with Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, says, and I heard this from people at the conference, this is about democracy. And there's real questions in Europe whether the United States under the Trump administration, aggressively supports democracy and aggressively supports human rights in general. There was a tenor of the speech about Western civilization and that sort of the West had certain rights, but the rest of the world was different. And a fascinating dynamic, too, was that there were many young Democrats there. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was there, and she made a point in a meeting she had with some reporters of saying human rights extends to Palestinians. That's obviously a very controversial topic, Gaza, but it was a really stark contrast, even though Rubio tried to smooth it over, between Trumpism, what that stands for, and then Democrats trying to offer a different, I think, vision for the future.
Richard, one of the things that is really important, and you know this better than I, in foreign policy is consistency. And a lack of consistency that we've seen from administration to administration on foreign policy in this country, but also in this administration, from speech last year from J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, to the speech this year, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. What did you read into the difference in tenor where you have J.D. Vance chiding all of the European allies in a speech in Europe last year to what we saw from Marco Rubio this year?
Let's go back to your first point, which is consistency and predictability are essential if you want to be a successful great power and one that has alliance commitments. You can't introduce doubt. Doubt is corrosive for alliances, the countries that depend on you. It's also corrosive for deterrence because it makes others much more likely to challenge you. In this case, Russia, China, North Korea, and others who mean us no good. So, it was, again, Marco Rubio's speech. As you saw, people in the hall reacted favorably, at least at the moment. I think the more they read the text carefully afterwards, it was a little bit less favorably, as it didn't really indicate a change in policy. And look how you began this segment. You've got Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine. Quite honestly, Marco Rubio, unfortunately, does not control U.S. policy towards Ukraine. I think based upon Senator Rubio, he'd probably be much more supportive of Ukraine, much tougher towards Russia. But he doesn't control it. So again, I think the speech was welcome, but a speech doesn't make a policy. And the speech ends. You wake up the next day. Donald Trump is still president. Witkoff and Jared Kushner are doing Ukraine. They're doing Iran negotiations. And then Marco Rubio didn't help himself by flying off to meet with Viktor Orban, who is symbolic of an illiberal alternative to liberal Western Europe. So again, speech positive, but I think more than offset by the totality of American foreign policy.
Yeah, David, I want to kind of pick up there as you talk about the ways that Witkoff and Kushner have increasingly come to control some of the major negotiations on foreign policy topics during this administration. Can you talk about some of the conversations that you had on the ground about that role that they are playing, specifically as you have Witkoff leading in these conversations, making multiple trips to Russia, speaking with Putin in attempts, we believe, to end the war in Ukraine, and then, of course, also controlling these discussions around Iran. What are you hearing about Witkoff's role itself, but then also what they might be driving towards in some of these key negotiations?
So in terms of Russia, a senior European official warned me that essentially Moscow and Putin are dangling money in front of the Trump administration. Last week, President Zelensky said that an aide to Putin is sort of talking with Witkoff in private about up to $12 trillion somehow in economic and business agreements between the U.S. and Russia. Richard just pointed out to me that the entire Russian economy is $2 trillion. So how it grows by 4 or 5 times between now and then is unclear. But essentially, there's been great reporting also by the Wall Street Journal about family business deals being made in the Middle East, and also, the pursuit of that specifically by Witkoff for business deals in Russia. So there's real concern about what the priority is for the Trump administration among European officials. And then on Iran, there's a sense that the United States will use force there. Some sources in the Middle East have told MS Now that if the bottom line is this demand by President Trump of no enrichment of uranium of any kind in Iran, the Iranians won't accept that. So it's, you're looking at confrontation there as well.
Yeah, that's always been a key sticking point in these conversations with Iran, not just for the Trump administration, but for the Obama administration, too.